Welcome back to my little homestead, Hermitage Homestead, the apiary, and now what we term the Garden of Beeden. Larry's films have been popular, had some nice feedback from people saying, I can't have beehives, either from zoning regulations or maybe some physical limitations, or some people are just quite considerate of their neighbors. They maybe have a child or someone in the neighborhood who's allergic to bees, and they will not risk having a hive around. And that's, just the right thing to do. No need to take that chance. But what they can do is plant a few plants for the pollinators, not just the honeybees, the bumblebees, the native bees, the moths, the butterflies, even the bats need some nectar from the flowers. So what we're wanting to do here is give people some means to select some plants and see them in location growing. This was an old homestead. A house was here built in the 1800s. It fell in. The next people used the basement hole and had kind of a contrived trailer house and lean-to over that basement. So this is reclaimed from construction sites. I have a lot of sympathy for the people of Detroit who are doing some great things in urban gardening, urban renewal, letting people grow some of their own food and reclaiming some of that overdeveloped and decaying parts of the city. I did a little research for this. Census says there's 130 million households in the USA. Through the National Gardening Association, says 100 million of those have a yard, garden, or both. And if we can convince just every yard or garden to plant one bee plant, just one, we pick up 130 million. If you can plant a bed, so much better. And I don't mean to limit this to the U.S. We got 7 billion people on the planet. Everybody with one bee plant, we do a lot to help Mother Nature feed its bees and to feed us, because a third of our plate is directly insect pollinated, and we're going to have to fight industry to keep the insects alive to do that work for us. A location here, just for your orientation, we're sitting at about 40.5 degrees north latitude. We're at about the 98th parallel longitude. Altitude here is about 1/3 of a mile, 1750. We are in cold hardiness zone 5, now /6 with global warming. That zone system came out in about 1960. In 1995, the American Hort Society came out with another measure of which plants to plant called the heat hardiness zone. And in that, we are in zone 6/7. And that refers to the fact that plants, cellular proteins, start to be damaged at 86 degrees. Our zone 1 has no days of the year with a high over 86, and there's just a small bit of the Rockies that has that. Here at zone 6/7, I think that the divider between the two is 60 days. Our meteorological data here says we get 56 days a year average where our high exceeds 86 degrees. And even with that utility and handiness of those two zones, it doesn't take into account humidity and the amount of winds. Here in Nebraska, our wind makes the Windy City look pretty calm. We can't have political conventions in Nebraska because it would just blow everything down with all the wind. And that's why in this garden I've planted a row of hazelnuts on the south to protect from those nasty south winds. And on the north there's an up and coming hedge of cedars, both very hardy species, and you know, the south wind's a problem in the summertime, and the hazelnuts are leaved out nicely. So I'm getting a nice sheltered garden here without having to build 6-foot English brick walls, and then the county assessor would just come out and raise my taxes. But so far they haven't found a way to tax us for a natural plant protection system. We can start into the plants. Down to my right, there's this blue blooming plant called Vicia or cowvetch. I will jump between common names and Latin names, and at the end of the video we'll talk about a compilation of these names and things that grow in Nebraska. But when we talked about the tough conditions here in Nebraska, Harlan Hammernick is probably our preeminent nurseryman in Nebraska. He started Bluebird Nursery. It's sort of in the hands of his sons, but Harlan is still doing the things he loves in the research. He says, if a plant can grow in Nebraska, it can grow anywhere. We won't, you know, it's reminiscent of Frank Sinatra singing New York, New York, but I'm not going to torture you with my voice because I'm a charter member of the Monotones, as is, well, some pop singers, but we won't mention any names. Okay, to the plants. This nice blue flower thing is the Vicia cowvetch. I watched where some bloomed last year in the road ditch. When they redid this road through here, they did throw in some alternate plants, some native species and some legumes to give a little diversity. I went and collected the seeds. I waited a little long, but I did find 20 seeds and planted those this spring. They were up in no time with the most interesting little cotyledon I've ever seen. And just in the last week, these from seed started blooming. Those that germinated last fall and had a start have been blooming much of the summer already. I love this little yellow plant. It's not just Cheerios box yellow, it's neon yellow. I don't know why we don't use it more just as a ground cover. It would tolerate a high mowing and reblooming. There's some in the road ditch, which is just across the hedge there, that the Department of Roads mowed, and it's coming back and blooming thick again. It's a great plant. The bees love it. It's a plant that kind of times its nectar release in the morning. The bees will visit it in the morning, and then they'll go to other things in the evening. We don't have many bees in the garden right now because there's still the tail end of the mellow lotus, the yellow sweet clover. Mine, in being sheltered in here, it's a little bit brown and gone to seed, and next to it is a variety called Hubam, white sweet clover. It blooms later, extends that bloom season, and it's a little bigger and hardier. It's sort of yellow clover on steroids. But behind the vetch, this tall stuff, and the vetch is crawling in it, is Nebraska state flower goldenrod. It will be a great fall honey plant, and that's kind of a nice bridge for when the main flow of the clovers are done. That goldenrod, sunflower, the asters, the smartweed are blooming in the fall to help those bees stock up their honey supply to get them through the winter. A good beekeeper quits harvesting after the clover flow, makes sure that that hive has plenty of honey to get through the winter. And the goldenrod's a good storehouse for that. The sunflowers are right next to it, and they're also a great fall flower. Right here is a plant called Cleome, common name and scientific. Seeds from a sweet friend in Omaha. Sandra's just as pretty as these flowers are. I liken these to a commercial fireworks display. It's like a frozen early explosion up in the sky. And oddly enough, they first start blooming right around the 4th of July too, so we should maybe call this our Independence flower. The bees are crazy about it. Dawn to dusk. They'll be out here in the evening when I'm taking advantage of the cool evening hours of the summer just to work in it. And they're not too plentiful quite yet. These are strays, and when I get self-seeding volunteers in other places of the garden, if there's room in that bed, I just let them grow. The main bed's behind me about 15 feet. But a great flower, they'll get 6, 7 feet tall. I'm a barefoot 6-footer, so you can use me for a gauge out here on how big things are. And just starting to bloom this week is this Russian sage, or Perovska. Also another bee favorite, and it'll bloom probably till frost. I tried to be a bit native with the things here, just because we know things are acclimated. But I brought in some outsiders once in a while. And this sage is known to be a little bit invasive. I got all 12 of these starts from a friend just a few miles down the road, because hers were spreading and colonizing a little bit, and she didn't want these, so I got some freebies. And we could call this the frugal gardener section, because I hate to spend more money than I have to, or I like to maximize my return. These are plants for my friends the Swirmikes around Glenwood, Iowa, a horse mint. And back behind this is a native it's native here too. I saw a pasture just 2 miles away that was just blue with this verbena. Common name is hoary, H-O-A-R-Y. Don't get any bad ideas now. Vervain. But it's verbena stricta, I believe. And I like that. It's a nice blue. This horse mint is in the Monarda family, and one of the Monardas is called bee balm, and bees like the lavender colors. While I'm on that subject, bees sight range starts to the right of ours. If you're looking at the UV spectrum, they don't see the infrareds, they don't see the reds that we see. It's still debated whether they don't see them, or they see them as black, or they just ignore them. So all the work for hybridizing red flowers, and of course that's real popular here with Nebraska being cornhusker country, but bees evidently aren't cornhuskers. They aren't attracted to red flowers, so you won't see much red in my garden here. But they shifted to the blue and the UV. They see things, and they see things differently than we do, because of their vision for the UV spectrum. They will see the rays of the flowers, and the flowers have evolved with the bees for 100 million years. Flowers that survive put almost road maps to the pollen source, directing the bees where the nectar and pollen is, gets the plants pollinated, moves the bees on, and stimulates the whole process. Plants that are nice clubs for remembering your friends and the people that gave you things. Terry there, Sandra there. My sister Diane loved this Althea, Malva Althea fastigiata. Fastigiata stands for taller. It's a perennial. She saw that at Harlan Hammernecks again up at Clarkson, and had to have some. She had some volunteer seedlings come up when I moved these here last spring, and 3 came back real well. Now I'm getting a good crop of seed, which I will collect and try to grow some from seed. Another good seed source here in Nebraska, I'm going to put in a plug for my friend Ed Rasmussen, who has the Fragrant Path. You can, fragrantpath.com, I believe, but the search engines are so good now, you'll get it. it'll say he's at Fort Calhoun, Nebraska. View his catalog. I got some other plants that I got going that I started from his seed. This plant's out of place. There's a whole bed of it up there. It's just common catnip. I have it all over the acreage here. I moved about 15 of them into one bed just to see what a bigger feeling of it is. And the bees are crazy about that. Cats like it, bees love it. This bed, well, some of the seed from Ed that I was telling you about, is partridge pea. I wish it was in bloom, but we're just a little bit early. It also blooms a nice Cheerios yellow. It's in the legume family, so it's fixing nitrogen. It's sad we've gotten to the point where you put together the two words fertilizer plant, that you think of some factory and smokestack and that type of thing, either slaking lime or Haber processing natural gas into anhydrous ammonia for fertilizing. But my fertilizer plants are on site. This ground will be mellow and it will be fertilized for next year if I want to follow. Now I planted this bed last year. Everything here self-seeded quite well. It was a learning process for me, worked like a charm. In fact, I planted a new bed but with some older seed, and it doesn't look nearly as nice as this bed that came up on its own. And until it blooms, we get a little color from the cleome that are scattered in here. If you're asking yourself by now, and it's quite logical, where's the rose? Well, I was influenced by Alan Chadwick and his student John Jevons to go to this bed system. All of this garden is 5-foot wide beds, 1-foot wide walkways. The plants are pretty much equidistantly spaced to make the most use of each square inch. Alan Chadwick was a Shakespearean actor, kind of a curmudgeon, a little bit difficult to get along with, a little bit sold on himself. I talked to someone who knew him and knew John Jevons and said poor John put up with a lot of abuse to learn the stuff that Chadwick knew, but man, he was knowledgeable. He was known in California on the college campuses would have him take a piece of beat down earth or a tract that had been a construction site, and he'd have it in bloom the next year. The secret to that is loosening the soil. All of this plant list did not come out of the ether. I borrowed from a bunch of sources, and I will share those with you. One of the backbones is an organization called pollinators.org. You can access it on the net that way. They have compiled plant lists for the Bailey ecosystem regions of the U.S. We are situated right on the borderline between the prairie parkland to the east and the plains steppe region to the west of here, so the plants can overlap some. Maybe some on one region don't extend into here or from the extreme end of the other. But that is a good source. Another good source on which I relied heavily is John Lovell's book. It's almost 100 years old, called Honey Plants of North America. Another nice list is in Buckman and Nabham's book called The Forgotten Pollinators, and that's sort of a call to action that our environmental damage is risking our pollinators, not just honeybees, but Lepidoptera, the moths, clear up to bats, everything that is uptaking toxic pollen. I would like to insert, right here, probably the 6 or 7 big plants for the spring are wild plum, Nanking cherry, pussy willow, henbit, the lowly dandelion, excellent honey source, black locust, and then if you happen to have any orchard, the fruit trees, especially the apricots and the cherries, Pears not so much. Peaches are very good. If you are a spring flowering bulb, some of those bulbs are almost too early. It's maybe too cool for the bees to go out and forage, but things like crocus, scilla, snowdrops, hyacinth, summer backbone, the clovers, the true clovers, the trifoliums, the low white Dutch, which people try to get out of their yard, the red clovers, which were blooming here pretty well, the lotus corniculata, or that bird's foot trefoil, that yellow one that we talked about. The vicia is very good summer. Tilia, the linden tree, huge amounts of honey there. And that both those malvas, the perennial and the annual, sylvestris and fastigiata. In the fall, they like goldenrod, they like joe pye weed, they like asters, the smartweed or heartsease, sunflowers. And if you're a clematis fan, most of them are early, but there's one in the fall called Sweet Autumn Clematis. It's a small blossom, but it's a snowdrift. I'd recommend that highly. Other sources, land-grant universities, county extension, Wikipedia is excellent. There's some good people there updating lists there. I wish they would add, I've been meaning to write them. They're very complete on so many things, but I think if they would say the pollinator for each plant, be it wind, bee, bumblebee, native bees, mason bees, moths, beetles, etc., I would like to see that on the site. And that has kept us pretty well informed. I would like to be Uncle Sam in the suit saying, I want you to garden for the bees if you can't have the bees yourself. If you can't garden for the bees, be an activist. Write or call the EPA or your senator and say, why are we putting these, approving these chemicals that are toxic, not just to bees, but as Hank Tenneke says in the Netherlands, a toxicologist, they're destroying the whole web of life. We can't continue this way. Larry's fielding some questions that people think they're talking to me. I go to the film sites and monitor. I will try to answer as much as I can. I have answered some. One of the most common things is that guy crazy or is he gifted in working the bees without protection? A lot of it's frame of mind. I use the same meditation to work the bees as I do when I want to get to sleep at night. It's a biofeedback mechanism where you imagine your hands are warm, your forehead's cool, your jaw's relaxed, your legs are heavy, your breathing is slow and deep, and it will get you ready and transform you for the bees. Works for me. Till next time.